FCO, NTDO 212, com check.
DPS, go. Inco, go. PUS, go. Surgeon, go. Booster, go. Copy that. We have a go from you guys.
This is Talking Sound.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Talking Sound podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host. Our guest today is the producer of the music that you are hearing right now, the incredible Even Flow by Pearl Jam. We have with us today producer and engineer Dave Hillis. How are you doing today, Dave?
I'm doing just great.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy production schedule to step aside and kind of talk to our audience about how somebody gets into your position. Like we were saying in the pre-interview, there is such an incredible path that people take in this industry to get to where they are and to do what they do. Let's explain to our audience a little bit some of your history and how you came to start stepping behind the console, Dave.
All right. As of how it kind of works today, it was much different when I started off, as you know, everything is in the industry. But back when I started off, really what got me into production, as it were, was just being in my own band, starting my own bands, and doing demos at home with my own 4-track and 8-track, and saving up for money just to get into local studios. There were nothing fancy. I lived in the outskirts of Seattle, and they were just, small studios. I worked my way up to 24-track 2-inch places, and didn't really know what we're doing, just getting in there and recording as much as we could. And that's really what I lived for, is just saving up money to get into the studio. And as that kind of developed, obviously I became more and more interested in the process. But I was still pretty focused on my band and the music I was doing. And I was lucky enough to get a record deal with Metal Blade Records right at high school, coming out of high school. And so I was pretty, involved in that side of it. But as time went on, I just started getting more and more intrigued about the actual recording process. And so I just started doing a lot of it on my own. After recording a demo at London Bridge Studios in Seattle, I got to know one of the brothers, the owners, Rick Parasher, who was not even, he was before he had ever done any big records yet. He was just starting, or he just done the Alice in Chains demo, like way before they were signed or anything. And I'd already played with all the guys from Alice in Chains, the Pearl Jam, and all these different things in different bands, like different rehearsal rooms, everybody's like musical chairs. It was very incestuous scene in Seattle at the time. So we all crossed paths one way or the other. And I was actually a little ahead of them because I was right out of high school. I was a couple years older. So, but this one particular evening, he asked me, how'd the sessions go at the studio? I saw him out, and he said, and I said, that was great, and I knew who he was. We didn't really know each other well. He hadn't worked on my session, and he said, well, why don't you come out? I'm going to have a party over there. And I went to London Bridge, and we were talking that night, and he goes, yeah, I'm kind of looking for a new guy, blah, blah. And my ears just opened up, I was like, really? And I was thinking, well, this could be a great opportunity. And I hounded him for, weeks, and came in there and like with all these demos I'd made and stuff like that. And he wasn't even interested in it. And I'm like, wow, because I don't want to hear anything. I just want to know that, you're motivated and you have the time and you want to do it. And I go, yeah.
Sure.
And so I showed up when he asked me to, and he was just finishing tracking, or they were right at the middle half of doing Temple of the Dog. And of course, I knew the guys already, and so they weren't really even coming in at this point. They tracked a lot of it or some of it, and then I kind of came in and started working with Rick on that. He was showing me how he was doing things and what was going on, and then I just stuck around for 10 years, and it was right when the studio started people were getting signed. So like from the moment I got there, I was working on major label records. And we were both kind of just thrown in the fire. Rick was obviously more advanced than me. And so he was a couple years older than me as well. Classically trained and all this. And, but it was cool because, first of all, the studio was amazing. I mean, they built it. There was really no need for a place like that at the time in Seattle, but it was one of those build it and they will come type thing. And it worked out. There was a Neve and a beautiful room and a beautiful Studer tape machine. And we started making records. And then we got on a roll, and, the rest is kind of history. In the meantime, in like 93, 94, I was demoing it off times in the studio, just practicing my craft basically, and using the board and so forth. And I ended up handing out a demo, and it got signed. It got signed to Polydor, and so I took a little hiatus, but Rick ended up producing the record. So I had a band called Triple Vein that was signed, and I thought, well, I'm off. I'm gonna be a rock star after all. And about 2 years later, we were dropped, and I went back to work at the studio. So that's how that kind of all worked out. But I got to see all kinds of different sides of the studio. I got to work with Rick as an engineer, and then he was my producer, producing me on an album, and then back and forth. So I kind of been in all the scenarios that you could be in making a record. So it really kind of ended up giving me a really wide experience and view of what happens and how to be on both sides of the glass. So when I work with and produce artists now, I kind of know, I can really read where they're at personally, and their, the emotions that are going through, the pressures or the whatever. I can relate to them pretty easily. So it was all worked out for a reason.
Yeah, and I mean, I noticed that you were saying that in the beginning it was very much guerrilla engineering. It was just get in there, get your hands dirty, and spend as much time behind gear as possible. That's something that I try to drill into people as much as possible whenever I work with them, help train them as an engineer, be it in audio, video, what have you, is play with it, learn what the things do. It's the only way you're going to learn. You can learn it from a book all day, but until you actively start turning knobs, seeing what the sound difference is, and seeing what happens, it's a little bit hard to really know.
Well, absolutely. And I'll tell you, the other thing was, it's like with Rick didn't really come from a rock and roll side of things. I mean, a little bit, but he's a classically trained pianist. He liked his rock and roll and stuff, but he wasn't a rock and roll guy. Let's put it that way. But he understood it. He got it. He's brilliant at writing harmonies and things like that. And very, very precise and particular in engineering. And I learned so much with him about pre-production. Very into pre-production, making the arrangements and everything right before you started the record. So sure. I learned a lot about that from him. But the thing was, where I added to him that he kind of used me for a lot too, was that I understood rock and roll, and I was in a band, and I could relate to the guitar players, and I knew what kind of cool amps they wanted to use, or when they got something cool, I was excited about it. Where Rick wouldn't know what the difference was. I'm like, dude, this is 59 Bassman, man, that Mike just got. We got to mic this with this, blah, blah, blah. He goes, all right, these are cool pedals. Try my pedals, blah, blah, blah. And so, like, all my experiences doing other things could be useful in the studio without even touching the board,
Yeah.
and just being able to talk and relate to people when doing guitar overdubs or vocal. I worked with so many different singers, and we were hiring singers every day in a band. And so I had ways, you become a team. And then as far as the technical things, like with tape machine, I would learn that off the tech. You just got to be a sponge.
Yeah.
Learn from everything. And then when, and don't let anything be, you're not above learning anything. And I'm still cleaning toilets at this time as well. You still got to do that shit. But your work, because we didn't have like a big staff or crew necessarily at the place, so everybody had to do something. But also like with the board, like I'm so excited at first about recording rock, doing rock records. And I go, Rick, run me through. He handed me a hardback physics book from the University of Washington. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, take this home and read it. You'll know everything you need to know about running the Neve. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? I want to play rock and roll, man. What the hell? I'm not in school. Had a little bit of that attitude. And then I realized, frequencies and blah, blah, blah.
The physics of sound.
Yeah. And then, of course, then I started getting kind of obsessed with that once I realized what it was all about. So, but like for today, I guess how you do it today, I mean, there was really no schools or anything, at least that I was aware of back then. Nowadays it's like you do a school or you start interning. I mean, it's hard. There's no money in it. There's no money in it when I was doing either. You just figure out how you're going to survive. It's the same. It's a different, more things change, more stay the same. It's a different way, different landscape, but it's still all about the hustle,
Yeah.
And getting in the right place at the right time.
Well, and that's just it. And that's the story that I like to convey to people more than anything is even you yourself with albums that are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, things like Pearl Jam 10, stuff like that you engineered. You're still saying it's about the hustle. Like you still have to hustle to get people into your studio, to get sessions booked, to keep the doors open, to pay bills.
It's rare. Like sometimes you're hot, and it doesn't. Sometimes you're hot, and if you get a mega success, things can come to you. Really, it took like 10 years. It felt like 10, 15 years for anybody. I couldn't get hit by a bus, even though I did program hours. It didn't seem that big of a deal.
Yeah.
For some reason, it was, I guess, but it wasn't. I didn't even have a platinum record up on my wall or anything until I opened the studio. Somebody said, you should put one of those up.
Yeah.
People will kind of, I'm like, think? I mean, I was totally like oblivious to it. And it kind of took later on until where people, I guess, when it kind of became iconic. But the way the industry, unless you're, I mean, it's all, you got to be hot that moment, And one thing I learned for sure is like, when you are, run with it, because you never know when you're going to get hot again or when that next project's going to come again. So you just always got to keep working and keep hustling.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but keep growing your skills, whether you're a musician, engineer, what have you. Always be learning. Always try to get your hands on new gear, get some time behind new gear. Even I myself,
I couldn't agree more.
Like I was telling you pre-show, I've gone much more the video route since I moved to Austin, and people found out I was a broadcast video engineer. And in that time, audio has gone totally digital. Now,
right, I spend all my time learning new. I mean, this absolutely, like, and especially now in this day and age, because technology is moving so exponentially and so fast that you have to, like, most of my time now is all spent on, an MPC X or new synthesizer or keyboards or whatever, or programs or plugins or whatever, because you have to be up on your game. And even if, like, I might be known for a Pearl Jam record, but I want to be able to walk in anywhere and bust out,
whatever,
a programmed song if I need be, or at least be intelligent enough to speak with the artist or who you're producing or engineering. you know what that gear is doing and how to tweak it or whatever. Because if you don't, it's like going into something and you don't know how to play guitar and you're trying to produce a guitar player, or you don't have any musical skills. There are some producers who work that way. And that's an element to it where you could be Rick Rubin, don't play anything. But they're focusing their skills on arrangements or, and learning how to communicate, the right words to use, the right phrases to use, adjectives to use. Those are all incredibly important things that you can always be honing your skills.
Yeah. And that's absolutely a time saver to know the shorthand, like you were saying earlier, for you to be able to translate between guitarist and engineer in the studio, because the engineer that was there didn't really know anything about guitars or amps or stuff like that. For you to be able to step in and translate. It also makes them
excited too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like when you can keep or a drum or anything, you can talk shop with them a little bit. That keeps them engaged and enthusiastic. And
sessions get long. It gets very grueling. Let me ask you a real question here.
They did back in the day.
Oh, sure. I was just about to say, with the advent of digital and the ready availability of it now, have you noticed that musicians come to the studio more prepared when they come to record, or?
I would have to say the exact opposite.
Oh, wow. Get into that a little bit.
Oh, well, the difference between making, and when I say making, I underline all this, making records back in the day, when I started, it's pretty much the end, it was probably that last era of making records, like artfully making records.
Yeah.
I don't really think it's done that way. I'll use Pearl Jam as an example again. Those guys had already done, in bands together and bands, separately, demo after demos after demos and playing shows and all those things. Then they were in Mother Love Bone, which they climbed up the ladder enough to get, a demo deal, and then get signed, do a whole record, EP and a record. And then, that fell apart. And then they went and then did Pearl Jam and we did 2 month-long demos before we even started the record.
Oh, wow.
And so that being said, it's like they were so prepared and knew studio etiquette and knew what it was like, and written hundreds of songs at that point. Been in, so many situations where they even made a record. And then, we demoed in pre-production and all these things. And then we had, a good 6 weeks, if not more, to make the record itself. And there was no Pro Tools. We didn't have Pro Tools then. So
yeah, exactly.
It was all day, 10 in the morning, and they weren't partiers or anything. It was all work. Till, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. And pretty much every day, I think a couple days off and the whole time, maybe. I didn't have a day off. I would be usually there comping or something of that nature. But no, people were prepared and knew what they were doing, and they were good players. And so I would get people coming in and saying, well, I started seeing something happening probably in the early to mid 2000s where it was like, you'd see a band that, they get a rehearsal room, they'd write 10 songs, have been together for 6 months or something, 8 months, and they think they're going to go make a record, and they'd come in and want to make a record, and they'd have hardly any money.
Yeah.
But can you make it sound like this or that record or this record? And I'm like, well, no.
For more money, yeah.
A $250,000 budget. It was all these years of experience, a lot of work, and you're not them.
Yeah.
And so, there was this, it seemed like everybody's getting into the quicker fix. It's even worked its way into like mastering. Like, I remember when mastering was so expensive to do, and such a big deal. And you had to be like a 60-year-old dude that had been around forever who had earned his wings to be called a mastering engineer.
Yeah.
And it was the most ultimate step to go to a mastering.
It took a little something to become a Bob Ludwig, you know.
You took a little practice. and now you can be, now you're online or people think they'll get it done for $59.
Yeah.
I've heard people argue about it.
Yeah.
Price of it. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I bought a copy. I bought a copy of Isotope. I can master your stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like, I would have to do like 100 mastering jobs to pay for one of the compressors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's so things have like definitely been diluted and watered down, and the actual, just the art form of making it too. It was considered. I mean, you were making this huge, hopefully huge. The goal was going to make this huge statement that could possibly change the world. It would be remembered for all of history.
Yeah.
That's what it was like when you were going, and that was the goal. And people were really, they're really bent on making sure that that's what, or tried everything they could to make that happen.
Well,
there's moments, say in the 80s or wherever, where it might have got cheesy, but even then they were trying to make these epic songs, pop hits or whatever it was. I just was reading about, what's his name? The gentleman who did, the producer who did Bat Out of Hell with Meatloaf, Jim Steinman.
Mm.
And like everything he went into had to be the biggest, giantest production and songs and choirs, and people were in it. And now it's like it's becoming, and with streaming and things like that, the whole concept has become very disposable.
Yeah,
you're not buying something to own. You're streaming something that you're into for a few days and then you're over. It's disposable. You didn't invest any money. You didn't invest in it. So there's not, it's lost a lot in that sense.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because I myself, as a video editor who did event and corporate videography for years and years, whenever I moved back home from Maine and started doing that again, because it's quick, easy money, I started getting footage back from people. And as someone who had learned to shoot and edit deck to deck, where it was like you're punching in your in and out points on a tape, and you
just like on tape or not.
Yeah, and much like in a studio, whenever people came in to record, man, they were recording to tape. That was expensive. Like a reel of Ampex tape was not cheap. And
that's what the big glory was when you got a major label deal. You could afford tape.
Yeah,
you
exactly. You
budget.
actually.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember having to work out the tape budgets, for the records, because that was part of my job. And, we would have, like with Pearl Jam, for instance, we filled so many reels of tape, because their whole strategy going in was they were very adamant about capturing everything live.
Yeah.
Had to be live. And so we went reel after reel after reel to where we had a window that from the control room into the lobby. And it just was a ledge on it, and it was just filled with tapes to where you couldn't see through it.
Yeah.
We had to spend days and weeks. After deciding, we've got the takes, we had to go through and then listen to them all.
Yeah.
And find the ones we liked and pick, and then edit if needed. Sometimes there might be, the ending of the song was great on this take, and take 32 was cool all the way up to here.
Yeah,
and,
so we do splice the two together. And that's just it. When you're dealing with analog, it is not nearly as forgiving as digital. Now, granted, digital on the front end will clip and sound nasty in a heartbeat. You don't have the warmth of being able to oversaturate a channel. But when it comes to editing, you can punch record all day long.
Sure, and you're not as worried. Like you were scared every time you saw the red light.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
exactly.
So that was part of the whole psychology of it, it just took on a new thing, which in some ways we gained a lot, and in a lot of ways we lost a lot. But even like with vocals, when the takes were done, we had to comp them. We'd have a lyric sheet. Rick being the producer and that, would pick out parts, and I would comp those together. Now comping today, is just a piece of cake on Pro Tools.
Sure.
I had to set up blank tapes and use the remote on the studio bench and punch in parts to another take. And like if I was punching on a keeping tape and I missed a front of or anything, a vowel or anything, that's it. I screwed it up.
Yeah.
So
it's
I
gone.
was sitting you're like sweating, nervous for hours doing these things and making sure it's right, because the last thing you want to do is go in, man, we got to redo this one part. I missed it,
Yeah.
And those things would happen even while you're doing guitar parts or whatever, or man, I missed that punch, or whatever. And you hated it. So people were on their toes all the time. Like, you don't have to be with Pro Tools. You just pull the waveform out or shorten it,
And you know what's interesting? I've made the same argument because I was much more of a live engineer. I worked venues, private engineer for bands, stuff like that. And
I'm gonna thank you job.
I've said the same thing, that having a 32 channel digital console with a 31 band and compressor on every channel, I just hear people over mixing.
Yeah.
It's like, good Lord, you have crushed the entire mix because you've decided to put something on every single channel. Just
Although
because
I will
you can.
say, I think digital though has probably done. I feel to say that they, with having the what do you call it, like pre-mixed shows, that you can do.
Yeah.
I think that's really helped the consistency of live shows sounding better.
Oh, absolutely. To be able to go in,
I don't know how much.
Dial in your soundboard to a room, save the scene, and next time you're in that same venue, just dial it up, and that's your ground zero to start from. It's beautiful.
That's pretty cool. And there's some things like that with recording as well. But
sure,
I mean, it is. We lost so much as we gained more too. So but I don't know. That's life. That's the world. That's where we're dealing with.
It's been interesting though to see the industry eye turning back to analog, to see musicians going back to using analog, to see people starting even the adaptation of external gear that has analog connections and is fully digital, provides analog interface for all of your plugins,
I like
stuff
the
like
digital control. Digital control over analog gear, I think, is a cool direction that the manufacturers are going in. The problem I see though is like there's a lot of catchphrases and overused words, obviously, like warmth, tape saturation, blah blah blah. There's so many. I'm a total fan of running things through electronics. I love plugins, but you just can't tell me. I mean, I still think every piece of outboard gear beats it. It's just a personal thing. Tape, same way. I just think having molecules floating around and magnetic tape. You're actually
playing with physics. You aren't playing with a 1 and 0 representation of like I've got the waveform representation in front of me of this interview right now. It would be totally different sounding if I had it going to my 4-track that's in the background.
There's something different. I even like cassette tape. So
my analog 4-track gets regular use in my home studio. Regular use.
Yeah.
Yeah. To this day, it's 20-something years old.
The thing I think, though, that is missing even more than these catchphrases and things that people are, why engineers are going back to, using some outboard gear and hybrid systems, which I'm a total fan of, and I do it myself. But like I said, like I was talking previously, it's all that other stuff that came along with it that made the record special. Not just that was all part of it, the gear, but it was also because you had to do things and you had the budget to do things and there was more importance to it. That's a big factor missing, because if that ain't there and you just record it on a line Studio 2-ish machine through a Neve, it's still going
to... I noticed a big difference in people using analog, digital, things like that. And like we were saying, to be able to mix those two worlds now is great.
It's absolutely awesome. I mean, it would be hard not to have Pro Tools around. It would be hard.
Yeah. And I find it interesting because I've got racks and racks of analog gear. A lot of people ask me how I get the vintage sound in my music. I do a lot of electronic music. They're like, man, that just sounds so 90s. And it's like, yeah, I'm using an Emu rack mount synth from the 90s. That's why it sounds that way.
I have a bunch. I have a bunch of 80s gear, 90s gear.
Yeah,
I know. Well, what's funny is that you refer to the 90s as vintage, but we'll skip over that. But,
yeah. But as we do get more modern with this stuff, what do you do to try and get the message out there to people? What do you do to try and keep yourself relevant to modern audiences? Are you out doing workshops, anything like that, Dave?
Yeah, I have been. I honestly, for a number of years, even back when I was even doing hard rock stuff, I've always been involved in electronic music, and I got a sampler, I got a Roland S10 sampler. Jeez, I was in high school still, and I didn't even know what I was going to do with it. I just thought, I don't know what I'm going to do with this thing, but it seems so cool, and I've been using them ever since. So I always had that side of me, which has never been as well known, just because of the records that I've made. So now I'm very involved in a lot of programming and electronic music on my own, some of my own solo stuff. And then, yes, going around and doing the last year or so, I've been doing a lot more talks, tape summit I did last year at a studio called Welcome to 1979 in Nashville. By Chris Marr owns that from Marr Machines. He puts out their refurbished and rebuilt MCI tape machines that is pretty well known for that. Vintage King carries this stuff. And so I went last year we did a thing on Pearl Jam because it was their 10th summit. And so I was interviewed by Susan Rogers, who, was Prince's engineer. And so I've been doing a lot of those kind of things. We talked about recording to tape and what it's like, and a lot of kids who haven't worked on it, what it was like making a record then, like what we talked about. I'm doing another one of those, 1979, November 9th this year. And then I'm also doing November 8th at the Blackbird Academy, Blackbird Studios in Nashville. They have a school, Blackbird Academy. And I'll be speaking at that. And I'm kind of the same thing, kind of what we talked about. People, this generation seems to be really, students now are interested in how they want to hear firsthand and how those records were made pre all this technology. So, that's kind of what I've been doing right now, and developing artists here and there where I can, stuff like that. I have some of my own music I'm looking to put out this fall, or probably winter by the time I'm done. Just to keep me relevant, keep out there, and keep my skills sharp,
Nice.
Always looking for new artists to work with.
I can't express that any better. I say it all the time: practice. Keep your skills sharp, even if you aren't on the road, even if you aren't playing. Rehearse at home. You can do the same thing. Well, maybe minus tape, unless you've got a tape 4-track. You can do the same thing at home, folks.
But anything you can learn. I mean, the key to it is to be, if you're in the situation, the opportunity arises, you want to be ready to be able to do anything. There's somebody, we don't know how to do that. How do you work this synth, or how do you work this sampler? Oh, I know. Bam, that's your golden moment.
Yeah.
So, and that's helped me out so many times, because I could have been the guitar player or whoever, I thought I was a rock guy, and I'd be in a situation or a studio, and I said, "Oh man, I know how to run this." Really? Oh wow! And then you're in, and you just stole the gig.
Yeah, exactly. And with that in mind, one more time, tell them where they can go to register for the upcoming stuff at Blackbird Academy, where they can go to contact you for services, anything like that, Dave.
Yeah, I'm always interested in new artists or anybody that's looking for things like that I can help out with. So I have a website. It's davehillismusic.com, real easy. And that I'll have the dates on there as well for different talks and panels I'll be doing. probably doing some with the Grammys and things like that will be coming up. So, one that November 8th, they're both in Nashville, November 8th at Blackbird Academy. And there's still tickets for the Welcome to 1979 studios in Nashville, and that's November 9th. It's for the weekend. And Bill Bertelli is going to be there speaking. He's one of the keynote speakers. A bunch of great engineers, producers. It's in a studio with tape machines and everything. So definitely look them up. Welcome to 1979 Studios in Nashville. It's like a whole retro studio. And there'll be more stuff on my website. So DaveHillismusic.com.
Fantastic. Once again, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time today to come on. I'd love to have you on again just to go into different topics, go into different concepts of how people can get ready before they come into people like you to get their album produced. The steps that they can take to make that experience of onboarding into the studio better, smoother, so that you aren't just gobsmacked by the wow factor of gear and lose an hour just looking at stuff.
And getting the most out of your time,
Exactly. It's for everybody's benefit. So once again, thank you so much for taking the time, coming on, sharing your vast knowledge. Make sure to go on to DaveHillismusic.com. That is where you can find all of his services. That's where you can see his workshops, everything else. Please do hold the line while we close out here. While you're online checking that out, make sure to stop on by TalkingSoundShow.com. That is where you can get all the episodes. That's where you can get great industry articles from people like Rupert Neve, Sony, all kinds of great stuff. We also have the freelancer database there. If you're a freelance AV technician or engineer like me, it's a listing of the United States, state by state, that lets you find companies that hire freelance AV technicians. So go check that out. TalkingSoundShow.com. Make sure to go by audibletrial.com/Talking Sound for your free 30-day trial of Amazon's Audible today. Until next time, everybody, take care of yourselves, take care of your hearing, and remember, keep reaching for 11. We'll talk to you soon.